to golden moments in the winners' circles of the nation. Yes, the color of a true champion among champions. The color that makes...
They said a horse couldn't save a career. They were wrong. The story of Seabiscuit wasn't just about a legendary racehorse. It was about redemption, second chances, and a former child star fighting to prove she could still draw a crowd. But behind the Technicolor glory, the cameras were almost destroyed by real horses. The star nearly quit mid-production, and one scene required so many takes the crew thought they'd never finish. These are 20 weird facts about the story of Seabiscuit. And the bonus? The real Seabiscuit's jockey showed up on set and nobody recognized him. Saddle up. This race has more drama than the track. Number 1. When Shirley Temple signed on to play Margaret O'Hara, she wasn't Hollywood's little darling anymore. She was a 21-year-old woman, trying to outrun her own shadow. Temple had ruled the box office as a child, tap dancing her way through the Depression, but by 1948, audiences had moved on. Her recent films flopped. Studios whispered she was finished. But David Butler, the director, saw something different. He believed Temple could anchor a serious horse racing drama, not with curls and dimples, but with grit and heart. The studio wasn't convinced. They wanted a bigger name, someone with adult credibility. Butler fought back. He told them Temple understood pressure, understood performing under impossible expectations, understood what it meant to carry a film when everyone was watching. And if Seabiscuit was about an underdog defying odds, then casting Temple wasn't just fitting, it was poetic. She took the role knowing it might be her last shot. And when cameras rolled, she wasn't playing a character. She was fighting for survival, one scene at a time.
Seen and unsung was a girl whose heart rode with her.
Number 2. The film needed horses, lots of them, and not just any horses. They needed thoroughbreds that looked the part, moved like champions, and could handle the chaos of a movie set. Finding them wasn't easy. Most racing stables refused to let their prized animals anywhere near Hollywood. They'd seen too many productions where horses got spooked, injured, or worse. But the production team didn't give up. They contacted smaller ranches, private owners, and retired trainers until they assembled a stable of over 30 horses. The problem? None of them had ever been on a film set before. The first day of shooting at the racetrack, the sound of cameras clicking, crew members shouting, and boom mics swinging overhead sent the horses into a panic. 3 broke free from their handlers. 1 kicked through a fence, another trampled expensive lighting equipment. The insurance company threatened to pull coverage. Butler had to halt production for 2 weeks while horse trainers worked around the clock, desensitizing the animals to the sounds and movements of filmmaking. They played recordings of camera shutters, had crew members walk through the stables, even brought props onto the track so the horses could get used to the madness. By the time they started again, the horses were ready. But those 2 weeks cost the studio thousands and nearly shut down the entire production.
Thrills and throbs which studded the stubborn struggle to the top for this monarch of the...
Number 3. Barry Fitzgerald wasn't the first choice to play Sean O'Hara. The role was offered to character actor Thomas Mitchell, who'd won an Oscar for Stagecoach and had the gravitas the part demanded. Mitchell read the script, loved it, and agreed to do the film. But 3 weeks before shooting began, he backed out. No explanation, no warning, just a phone call to the studio saying he couldn't commit. Producers panicked. They needed someone with warmth, wit, and the ability to anchor emotional scenes without overshadowing Temple. Someone suggested Fitzgerald, the Irish actor who'd charmed audiences in Going My Way. But there was a problem. Fitzgerald was notoriously difficult. He hated early call times, refused to memorize long stretches of dialogue, and had a habit of rewriting his lines on the spot. Butler took the gamble anyway. He called Fitzgerald, explained the role, and to everyone's surprise, Fitzgerald said yes immediately. He didn't negotiate salary, didn't ask for script changes, just showed up on day 1 ready to work. And true to form, he rewrote half his dialogue. But instead of chaos, it brought authenticity. Fitzgerald's improvised lines felt lived in, real, like a man who'd spent his whole life around horses and heartbreak. Mitchell might have been solid, but Fitzgerald made the role unforgettable.
Whose faith was never shaken, who knew that his...
Number 4. Filming the racing sequences was a nightmare. The production couldn't afford to shut down a real racetrack for weeks, so they built their own. At Santa Anita Park, the crew constructed a quarter-mile track complete with grandstands, betting windows, and enough period detail to convince audiences it was 1938. But building it was one thing, filling it was another. They needed hundreds of extras to play the crowd, all dressed in period costumes, all coordinated to react at the right moments. The studio put out a casting call, and over 2,000 people showed up. Most had never been on a film set. They didn't understand blocking, continuity, or the concept of a second take. During the first crowd scene, extras waved at the camera, checked their watches, even started conversations mid-shot. Butler had to stop, gather everyone, and explain how movie crowds worked. Then came the technical challenge. To capture the speed and intensity of a real race, the cinematographer wanted tracking shots following the horses at full gallop. They rigged a camera to a vehicle that could drive alongside the track, but the first time they tested it, the car kicked up so much dust, the shot was unusable. They tried again with different tires, then different speeds, then a completely different vehicle. It took 17 attempts before they got a clean take, and by then, the horses were exhausted, the extras were restless, and Butler was ready to scrap the whole sequence.
Yes, the color of a true champion among champions. The color that makes...
Number 5. Shirley Temple did her own riding, and not just gentle trots for close-ups. She insisted on galloping at full speed, handling the reins during racing scenes, even mounting and dismounting without a stunt double. The studio hated it. Their insurance wouldn't cover her if she got hurt, and one fall could shut down production for months. But Temple was adamant. She'd been taking riding lessons for years and believed the audience would know if she was faking it. Butler supported her, but on one condition. They'd rehearse every riding scene with safety coordinators, mark out exact paths, and stop immediately if anything felt dangerous. Temple agreed. The first time she climbed onto a thoroughbred for a racing scene, the crew went silent. The horse was massive, powerful, barely controllable even for experienced jockeys. Temple settled into the saddle, gripped the reins, and when Butler called action, she took off. The horse surged forward, hooves pounding, and Temple leaned into the speed like she'd been born on a racetrack. The crew erupted in applause, but halfway through the second take, the horse spooked. Something, maybe a shadow, maybe a sound, sent it veering sharply toward the rail. Temple pulled hard on the reins, fighting to regain control. For a few terrifying seconds, it looked like she'd be thrown. But she held on, corrected the horse's trajectory, and brought it to a controlled stop. She dismounted, brushed herself off, and said, "Let's go again." After that, no one questioned whether she could handle it. Number 6. The Technicolor cameras were temperamental beasts. In 1949, shooting in color was still relatively rare and absurdly expensive. The cameras were huge, heavy, and required precise lighting to capture accurate hues. Every scene had to be lit like a painting, with color-corrected gels, carefully positioned reflectors, and constant adjustments for skin tones. But racetrack scenes created a unique problem. The outdoor setting meant relying on natural light, which changed constantly. Clouds would roll in, shifting the color temperature. Shadows would lengthen as the day progressed, and the dust kicked up by the horses would scatter light in unpredictable ways. The cinematographer, William Snyder, spent hours testing different film stocks, different exposure settings, different times of day. He'd shoot test footage, send it to the lab, wait overnight for results, then adjust and try again. One sequence, a sunset race scene meant to showcase golden California light, took 6 days to capture. Every evening, the crew would set up, position the horses, rehearse the choreography, and wait for the perfect moment when the sun hit the horizon. But something always went wrong. On day 1, clouds blocked the sun entirely. On day 2, a horse refused to cooperate. On day 3, the light was perfect, but an extra sneeze during the take. By day 6, everyone was exhausted and ready to settle for good enough. But Snyder refused. He waited, watched the sky, and finally got the shot. 10 seconds of perfect golden light that made the whole ordeal worth it. Number 7. The script went through 11 rewrites. The original version, written by John Tainter Foote, focused heavily on the horse racing world, with Seabiscuit as the clear protagonist and the human characters serving mainly as background. But as development continued, producers realized audiences needed emotional stakes beyond just watching a horse run fast. They brought in William Bowers to punch up the dialogue, then Lawrence Hazard to deepen the romantic subplot between Temple's character and Lon McAllister's Ted Knowles. Each writer added layers, but they also added contradictions. By the time Butler came aboard, the script was a mess. Scenes appeared in multiple versions. Character motivation shifted from draft to draft. Some sequences referenced plot points that no longer existed. Butler locked himself in a room with the writers for 3 days, spread all 11 drafts across a table, and started cutting. He pulled the strongest scenes from each version, stitched them together, and created a master script that balanced horse racing spectacle with human drama. But even then, changes continued during production. Fitzgerald's rewrites shifted his character's arc. Temple suggested modifications to make Margaret more assertive, and several racing sequences were condensed when the budget couldn't support the original vision. What audiences saw on screen wasn't the 11th draft. It was a hybrid of all 11, cobbled together through necessity and last-minute inspiration. Number 8. Lon McAllister almost drowned filming a water scene that never made the final cut. The sequence involved his character, Ted Knowles, rescuing a horse that had fallen into a lake near the O'Hara Ranch. It was meant to be a heroic moment establishing Ted's bravery and connection to animals. They filmed it at a reservoir outside Los Angeles, using a trained horse that could swim and a safety team standing by with boats. But when McAllister waded into the water, he realized 2 things. First, the reservoir was deeper than anyone told him. Second, the horse was panicking. The animal thrashed, kicking wildly, and McAllister, trying to grab its reins, got caught in the chaos. A hoof struck his shoulder, knocking him underwater. The safety team rushed in, but for a moment McAllister couldn't find the surface. Water filled his nose, his lungs burned, and he felt himself sinking. Then a hand grabbed his collar and yanked him up. One of the stunt coordinators had dove in, fully clothed, and pulled him to shore. McAllister coughed up water, bruised and shaken, but alive. Butler immediately shut down the scene. He decided the moment wasn't essential to the story and cut it entirely. McAllister later joked that he'd almost died for footage that ended up on the cutting room floor, but privately, he never went near deep water again. Number 9. The film's composer, Franz Waxman, had won an Oscar for Sunset Boulevard and brought serious musical credibility to the project, but he and Butler clashed constantly over the score's tone. Waxman wanted something grand and operatic, sweeping orchestral pieces that emphasized the epic nature of Seabiscuit's story. Butler wanted something more intimate and emotional, music that highlighted the human relationships. Their disagreements became so heated that at one point, Waxman threatened to quit. The studio intervened, arranging a compromise. Waxman would write 2 complete scores, one in each style, and they'd test both with preview audiences. The orchestral version was magnificent, powerful, perfectly synchronized to the racing sequences. But test audiences found it overwhelming, like the music was trying too hard to manipulate their emotions. The intimate version was subtler, gentler, and audiences responded much better. Waxman was furious. He'd spent weeks on the orchestral arrangement, only to have it rejected. But he was also professional. He took the intimate score and refined it further, adding small orchestral flourishes during key racing moments while keeping the emotional scenes stripped back. The final soundtrack walks a delicate balance, big enough to match the spectacle but small enough to let the performances breathe. Waxman never admitted it publicly, but years later he told friends that Butler was right all along. Number 10. Shirley Temple nearly quit mid-production over a costume dispute. Her character, Margaret O'Hara, was supposed to be a working-class Irish girl living on a horse ranch, someone who spent her days in practical clothing, boots, and simple dresses. But the studio's costume department had other ideas. They designed elaborate period outfits with intricate details, expensive fabrics, and styles more suited to a society debutante than a ranch hand. When Temple saw the costumes, she immediately objected. She told Butler they were completely wrong for the character, that Margaret would never wear something so impractical around horses. Butler agreed, but the studio pushed back. They'd spent thousands on the costumes and didn't want to scrap them. Temple stood her ground. She refused to film in the elaborate dresses, even staged a quiet sit-in in her dressing room. For 2 days, production stalled while studio executives and Temple's representatives negotiated. Finally, a compromise emerged. Temple would wear the fancy costumes for a few indoor scenes set at social gatherings, but her everyday ranch wear would be redesigned to something more authentic. The costume department grumbled, but they redid the outfits, creating simpler, more practical pieces. The delay cost the production time and money, but Temple didn't care. She knew the authenticity of her character depended on getting those details right. And she wasn't about to play a fantasy version of ranch life when the real thing was so much more interesting. Number 11. The real jockey who rode Seabiscuit, Red Pollard, visited the set during production. He showed up unannounced, wearing regular clothes, just another spectator watching the Hollywood magic. Nobody recognized him. Pollard wandered through the recreated racetrack, watched the horses train, even stood next to Barry Fitzgerald during a break. It wasn't until lunch that someone from the publicity department noticed an older man studying the racing scenes with unusual intensity. They approached him, asked if he was lost, and Pollard quietly introduced himself. The crew was mortified. Here was the actual legend they were depicting, and he'd been treated like a tourist. Butler immediately invited Pollard to consult on the racing sequences, asking him to verify their authenticity. Pollard was gracious but honest. He pointed out that the jockeys were sitting too high in the saddle, that their whip technique was wrong, that real races had more chaos and less choreography. He spent 3 days working with the stunt riders, teaching them how real jockeys moved, breathed, and thought during a race. His input transformed the sequences from Hollywood fantasy to something that felt genuinely lived in. When he finally left, the crew gave him a standing ovation. Pollard just tipped his hat and walked away. Number 12. During one racing scene, a horse broke through the rail and charged directly toward the Technicolor camera. The massive rig, worth more than most people's houses, sat mounted on a platform with the cinematographer and 2 assistants operating it. They were focused on capturing the approaching horses when suddenly one veered off course, spooked by something in the crowd. The animal crashed through the wooden barrier and galloped straight at them. There was no time to move the camera. The crew scattered, diving out of the way as the horse thundered past, missing the equipment by inches. The camera shook violently but didn't fall. When everyone recovered, they checked the footage, expecting it to be ruined by the chaos. Instead, they discovered they had accidentally captured the most thrilling, visceral racing shot in the entire film. The camera shake, the sudden proximity of the horse, the raw panic in the moment, it all translated as intense, documentary-style realism. Butler loved it so much, he kept it in the final cut. Sometimes the best cinema happens when everything goes wrong. Number 13. The film's biggest technical challenge wasn't the horses or the racing. It was creating authentic-looking 1930s newsreel footage of Seabiscuit's actual victories. The production needed these sequences to ground the story in history, to show audiences that this wasn't just Hollywood fiction, but matching the grainy, black and white aesthetic of real newsreels from 1938 proved nearly impossible with 1949 technology. The film stock was too clean, too modern. Every test looked fake, polished, obviously staged. The special effects team tried aging the film artificially, scratching it, exposing it to light, even burying strips in dirt to create authentic weathering. Nothing worked convincingly. Finally, they tracked down an actual 1930s newsreel camera, the same model used by Pathé and Movietone News. It was broken, obsolete, missing parts. But they restored it, loaded it with period-appropriate film stock they had sourced from a warehouse, and shot the newsreel sequences exactly as they would have been filmed in 1938. The result was perfect. The footage looked indistinguishable from real archival material, seamlessly blending with actual Seabiscuit newsreels they'd licensed. Audiences had no idea which shots were real and which were recreated. Number 14. Shirley Temple's marriage was falling apart during filming. She'd married John Agar in 1945, and by 1948, the relationship was crumbling under the pressure of two careers, public scrutiny, and personal incompatibility. Agar would visit the set sometimes, but the tension between them was obvious to everyone. Temple threw herself into work, using the long shooting days as an escape from her deteriorating home life. She never complained, never let her personal struggles affect her performance, but Butler noticed. Between takes, she'd sit alone, staring at nothing, lost in thought. The emotional scenes, particularly moments where Margaret O'Hara dealt with disappointment and heartbreak, carried an unexpected weight. Temple wasn't just acting, she was channeling real pain into the character. Butler later said her performance in The Story of Seabiscuit was the most mature, nuanced work she'd ever done, and he believed her personal struggles were part of why. By the time filming wrapped in early 1949, Temple had filed for divorce. The movie became a strange time capsule, capturing a woman caught between who she'd been and who she was becoming. Number 15. Barry Fitzgerald's drinking became a problem halfway through production. He'd always enjoyed a tipple between takes, but as filming dragged on, the drinks got earlier and more frequent. By afternoon shoots, his speech would slur slightly, his timing would lag, and Butler would have to call cut repeatedly. The studio wanted to fire him, but Butler refused. He'd seen Fitzgerald's brilliance in the sober morning hours and believed in the performance. Instead, he restructured the shooting schedule. All of Fitzgerald's important dialogue scenes were filmed before noon. Afternoons were reserved for wide shots, background action, scenes where Fitzgerald could coast on presence alone. It worked mostly. There were still difficult days, takes ruined by a stumble or a forgotten line. But when Fitzgerald was sharp, he was magnificent. His portrayal of Sean O'Hara carried genuine warmth and world weariness. A man who'd seen dreams die and refused to stop dreaming anyway. The performance earned him critical praise, though few knew how close he came to losing the role entirely. Number 16. The film premiered on April 9, 1949, at Grauman's Chinese Theater in Hollywood, and it was a disaster. Not the movie itself, but the event. A freak rainstorm hit Los Angeles that evening, flooding streets and forcing limousines to navigate through water that reached their wheel wells. Half the invited stars couldn't make it. The red carpet was a soggy mess. Camera flashbulbs shorted out in the rain, leaving photographers furious. Inside the theater, the air conditioning failed, turning the packed auditorium into a sauna. Women in formal gowns fanned themselves with programs while men loosened their ties. To make matters worse, the film print delivered to the theater had a sound synchronization issue. For the first 10 minutes, dialogue lagged a half-second behind the actor's lips. The projectionist had to stop, rethread the film, and start over. The audience, already uncomfortable and restless, grew impatient. But then something magical happened. Once the technical issues were resolved and the movie actually played, the audience forgot their discomfort. They laughed, they cried, they cheered during the racing sequences. By the final frames, the premiere disaster didn't matter. The film had won them over completely. Number 17. Seabiscuit himself had died in 1947, 2 years before the film's release. He'd been retired to stud at Ridgewood Ranch in California, living out his final years in peaceful obscurity. But the production still needed a horse to play him, and finding the right animal proved incredibly difficult. They auditioned dozens of thoroughbreds, but none had Seabiscuit's distinctive look, his compact build, his seemingly average appearance that hid extraordinary heart. Finally, they found a horse named Sea Sovereign, a bay thoroughbred with similar coloring and markings. He wasn't a racing champion, but he had a calm temperament and could handle the demands of filmmaking. The trainers worked with him for months, teaching him to react to cues, to run at specific speeds, to stand still during close-ups. Sea Sovereign became so identified with the role that after filming, the studio received letters from fans asking to visit Seabiscuit. The handlers had to gently explain that the real champion had passed away. Sea Sovereign lived another 15 years, retiring to the same ranch where Seabiscuit had spent his final days. A strange poetic symmetry. Number 18. The film's box office performance shocked everyone. Warner Brothers expected modest returns, maybe enough to recoup costs and generate small profit. Instead, the Story of Seabiscuit became one of the highest-grossing films of 1949, earning over $3 million domestically. The success came from an unexpected demographic. While the studio marketed it as a horse racing picture aimed at men, women turned out in droves. They connected with Margaret O'Hara's journey, with Shirley Temple's transformation from child star to adult actress, with the emotional core beneath the sporting spectacle. Families came back for second viewings, bringing children who'd never seen a horse race but fell in love with the story. The financial success revitalized Temple's career briefly, and proved that audiences still crave sincerity, heart, and old-fashioned storytelling. In an era increasingly dominated by film noir and gritty realism, the Story of Seabiscuit offered hope, redemption, and the belief that underdogs could win. Apparently, post-war America desperately needed that message. Number 19. Lon McAllister's career never recovered from being in this film, but not for the reason you'd think. The movie was a hit, his performance was well received, and he should have leveraged it into bigger roles. But McAllister was gay, living in an era when Hollywood demanded absolute secrecy about such things. During production, he became close with one of the stunt riders, and rumors started circulating on set. Nothing was proven, nobody said anything directly, but whispers traveled fast in Hollywood. After the Story of Seabiscuit, the major studios stopped calling. He was quietly blacklisted. Not officially, never acknowledged, but effectively erased from leading man consideration. McAllister took smaller roles in B-westerns, television appearances, character parts. He worked steadily, but never achieved the stardom his talent deserved. Decades later, after his death in 2005, friends confirmed what everyone had suspected. The industry's homophobia had destroyed a promising career, and the Story of Seabiscuit, his biggest success, had also been his last real chance. The film preserved his image as a handsome young leading man, frozen in Technicolor, forever young, forever trapped in Hollywood's golden cage. Number 20. The Academy Awards completely ignored The Story of Seabiscuit. 0 nominations, not for acting, directing, cinematography, or even score. Nothing. The snub stung, especially after the film's commercial success and critical praise. Warner Brothers had expected at least a technical nomination, maybe costume design or sound. Industry insiders said the Academy viewed it as too sentimental, too old-fashioned, too safe for a year that included All the King's Men and the Heiress. But there might have been another reason, one nobody said out loud. Shirley Temple represented Hollywood's past, a reminder of simpler times before war, before noirs, before complexity. The Academy was looking forward, embracing darker, more sophisticated cinema. A heartwarming story about a horse didn't fit the narrative they wanted to tell about American film in 1949. When the nominations were announced, Temple was filming another picture. She heard the news between takes, nodded quietly, and went back to work. No tears, no public statements. Just the kind of professionalism she'd learned as a child. Butler was disappointed but not surprised. He'd made the movie he wanted to make, one that moved audiences and made money. Awards were nice, but they weren't the point. The real victory was watching families leave theaters smiling, feeling like dreams were possible again. Years later, Butler admitted the snub bothered him more than he'd let on. Not for himself, but for his cast and crew who'd worked so hard. They'd poured everything into a film the industry dismissed as lightweight, as beneath serious consideration. But the audience never forgot. The Story of Seabiscuit remained in circulation for decades, playing on television, introducing new generations to a horse that refused to quit. The Academy might have looked the other way, but the people, they voted with their hearts, and in the end, that counted for more than any statue ever could. Bonus fact: the famous racing silks worn by the jockey in the film were authentic, on loan from Charles Howard's estate. Howard, Seabiscuit's owner, had died in 1950, but his family preserved everything connected to the horse, including the red and white racing colors. When the studio requested permission to use replicas, the Howard family offered the originals instead, believing Seabiscuit's story deserved that authenticity. The silks arrived in a sealed box, carefully preserved, still carrying faint traces of dirt from actual races. The wardrobe department was terrified of damaging them, treating the garments like museum pieces. During filming, they were worn exactly twice, both times for close-up shots where the details mattered most. The rest of the racing scenes used carefully crafted replicas. After production wrapped, the silks were cleaned, reboxed, and returned to the Howard family with a personal thank you letter from Butler. They now reside in a private collection, one of the last tangible connections to a horse who taught Depression-era America that second chances were real and that being underestimated was sometimes the greatest advantage of all.
To golden moments in the winners' circles of the nation.